Dear Lama, could you please explain meaning of Saga Dawa days what begin from yesterday?
Throughout the Buddhist world, the fourth month of the lunar calendar is celebrated as the Buddha month, if you will. Now, different countries in Asia have different calendars, so it's not consistent with the Gregorian calendar of the West. But generally, it starts with the new moon of May for Tibetans, Mongolians, and the Mahayana Buddhist world. And Tibetans generally think of the full moon as the peak experience, but the first 16 days, the waxing moon, are especially powerful for meditation, spiritual activity, pilgrimage, and so forth. The full moon is often celebrated as Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and parinirvana, passing away. So, of course, this is for convenience, most probably. Some other countries have a different day for Buddha's birth. But Saga Dawa in the Tantric world, in the Mahayana Buddhist world, the Lama's world, the full moon celebrates these three great deeds of the Buddha. Generally in Tibet, from the first day, every monastery, every temple would begin strong practice, usually of Shenrezi, Buddha of compassion. Tibetans tend to think of Shenrezi as being, the Buddha of compassion as being Tibet's special Buddha. The way it's put in many texts is the flower of the Buddha of compassion fell on Tibet. The meaning, I think, is that every Buddhist country emphasizes a different aspect of the Enlightenment teaching. Tibetans with Dalai Lama, other great masters, put strong emphasis on compassion as the foundation of all spiritual excellence. In Tibet, the seventh Dalai Lama made as a lineage from a great Nepali female mystic who lived in Parping, achieved enlightenment here in Nepal in Parping. Gelongpa Pelmo made her lineage of Shenrezi a kind of a national holiday in Tibet, if you will, for 16 days. And people wanting to do the Gelongpa Pelmo lineage of Shenrezi practice basically would be granted holidays from work if that were possible. So that meant government workers and so on could apply to do that 16-day either pilgrimage or strong meditation. That lineage was particular. Gelongpa Pelmo, this great female mystic, her name Gelongpa Pelmo, like Bhikshuni Shri, but refers to as a Buddhist nun. She started as a Buddhist nun, meditated for many years as a Buddhist nun. She became very ill, the documents say, or records, legends say, with leprosy. She had a vision of Shenrezi, Buddha of compassion, Lokeshvara, in Chinese Kuan Yin, in which she was given instruction on a fasting regime. She took it up as a practice and it cured her leprosy. Later on, she left the monastic life, if you will, and became a forest dweller, a great Mahasiddha, great tantric yogini. But the seventh Dalai Lama made her lineage a kind of a national celebration in all schools of Tibetan Buddhism. And until today, wherever, if you travel in Tibet in the fourth month, usually meaning May, because Tibetan New Year usually comes in February sometime, or at the very latest, early March. And that fasting retreat is very, very popular as a once-a-year practice. It's in 8 pairs, 8 sets, if you will. And all of those, one gets up early and practices meditation and mantra and so forth quite strongly. And on the first day of the set of 2, one eats one large vegetarian meal at lunch, and the next day has no food and no liquid. If you visit monasteries in Tibet, people won't even swallow their mouth fluids, because when you're thirsty, of course, your mouth starts really saying, food, food, drink, drink. So they travel with a towel, and if they get a little bit too wet around the lips, so to speak. And so one pair is like one day, one meal, and the next day, no meal, no liquid, no food, no liquid. And traditionally, that's done in a set of 8, meaning 16 days. So several monasteries here in Nepal have started it. Our little monastery hasn't, because this is really a monastic school for young monks, and that's a little bit of a strong practice for 8, 9, 10-year-old, 12-year-old children monks, if you will. But in the monasteries for the more adult monks and older monks, it's a very common practice. When I joined my 12-year study in Dharamsala, we even had one kind of a temple that was with the name Nyungne Lakong. And Nyungne means sort of like fasting or something like that. Nyung ne means to abide, and Nyung means to with simplicity or basics, something like that. But I usually translated as fasting. And every year, there's a geshe there running that temple. He just became known as Nyungne Geshe Rinpoche, the precious geshe who led the Nyungne retreats. Very, very wonderful Lama. And I was very fond of him, visited him many, many times. Here in Nepal, we're in a monastery we've just finished a Trubchen, a retreat, in a small monastery belonging to Trubta Rinpoche, one of the great Nepalese lamas, or tulkus. He was in Tibet at the time of the Chinese invasion of Tibet in the early 50s, and in 59 was arrested, and they actually hung him, trying to kill him 7 times, trying to force him to sign a paper saying that he would like to thank China for invading Tibet and destroying the monasteries and temples. He refused. They hung him 7 times. And he was good at tantric breath control, so he survived. And then, because he was Nepali, they sent him back to Nepal. And here he rebuilt 3 big temples, monasteries because Tibet was now closed for the traditional trainings. All the monasteries in Tibet were all closed. And so here in Nepal, in the Kathmandu area, he built 3 monasteries, one up behind Swayambhu, which is more adult monks, and the one downtown, which is all adult monks for serving the Tibetan community, if you will, or the Buddhist Vajrayana community. And the little one up here in Parping, the sacred meditation town, is largely for young children monks coming out of the valleys near the Tibet borders, hoping to get full education, and then when they're 18 or 19 years old, as monks, will have the choice of remain monks and go to one of the monasteries in South India for higher Tibetan studies. We should say Tibetan refugee monasteries in South India for higher studies, or go to a university either here in Nepal or in South India, or elsewhere in the world, if they will. So it's I think they have 7 or 8 adult monks, but about 75 or 80 young child monks between the ages generally of about 8 and 17 or 18. And because there's so many young ones, they don't do the Nyungne practice here. But there are other brother monastery or sister monastery behind Swayambhu, which is about, 50 or 75 adult monks in it. They do that practice every year, and many, many lay people participate. For Tibetans, Saga Dawa, the 4th month, every day the power or the blessing or the merits, as is sometimes said, of anything we do is multiplied 100,000 times. So many Tibetans of all schools of Vajrayana Buddhism dedicate these 16 days to very strong practice. For that reason, we time our annual retreats in Nepal to come here at the end of the 3rd month and the 1st week of the Saga Dawa. For many years, I led pilgrimages to Tibet, and we would usually try to time them with Saga Dawa, because since the late 1980s, China has relaxed on its oppression of Buddhism, and although it destroyed, of the 6,500 monasteries and temples, destroyed all but 13 of them, and even those 13 were closed during the Cultural Revolution. From the mid-80s allowed some opening and rebuilding and so on. So we would always try to I would always try to lead pilgrimages during that Saga Dawa, because in Tibet, every pilgrimage place is just bursting with spiritual energy of enthusiastic Tibetan pilgrims circumambulating and meditating, making strong, great practice. Now, in terms of peoples around the world who are Buddhist practitioners, during this time of year, the 16 days of this holy month, as Tibetans call it, if one can do a little bit more meditation, that's wonderful. It's the only 2 weeks of the year that Tibetans traditionally are vegetarian. And it's sort of the beginning of springtime, so it's quite easy to be vegetarian in Tibet at that time. The weather has become warmer, and there's barley left over from last year and a few new veggies coming up for the new year. The other 50 weeks of the year, generally 99.9% of Tibetans are meat eaters, a very high altitude with not a lot of veggies and fruits and things available year-round, and very cold climate. So it's kind of natural, you could say. But for this two weeks, Tibetans try to be vegetarian, generally, and to do strong practice. In terms of our Western Enlightenment movement, if you will, those Westerners who are practicing the Enlightenment tradition, I think the main thing is to try to practice as much meditation in these 2 weeks as possible. And if you don't, obviously a lot of people working, you have a lot of commitments between work, family, and so forth, but at least morning and evening to do as much meditation as you can. And if you're a mantra man or mantra woman, a tantrika, then to dedicate a little bit more effort to a mantra practice. I wish you well for Saga Dawa, and of course, if you succeed in Saga Dawa, with strong effort, and the great wave of positive energy will carry you through the rest of the year with flair and style.